Welcome, everybody. We have a truly fabulous show. Today, we are featuring a thought leader by the name of Gay Hendricks. Yes, you know who he is. He has written a book called The Genius Zone, and he and his wife have made many, many people a lot happier in their lives. And that is a mission to which I subscribed. It's what we try to do at EWA as well. So I'm so glad you joined us. We're going to learn a lot from Gay today. There are some surprising issues which will come up in our conversation, and I'm glad that you're with us to hear them. I'm Lorraine Siegel. I'm the founder, chair, and CEO of the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation. Our mission is to enable high-level women to reach their dreams. Why did I start this foundation? Well, I never had a mentor when I was growing up. In fact, in my early career as a lawyer, then as a CEO of a number of companies, even as a board director, I never had a guide to help me on my way. And I wanted to be sure that women who walked the road less traveled, as I certainly had, would always have a group of supportive women leaders who would enable them to reach their dreams. And that's exactly what we do at the Exceptional Women Awardees. Some of the things that we also do is to bring thought leaders to you, because thought leaders who make us happy are especially valuable contributors to our society. And Gay Hendricks is one of those unique and amazing people. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Gay Hendricks. Welcome, Gay.
Thank you, Lorraine. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to go straight to the question that you pose in your book, and that is about happiness and contribution. Tell us a bit more about it.
Well, the title of the book, The Genius Zone, is based on what I've discovered in the past 50 years of working with people, that we all have a space within us that I call your genius zone. And to me, the sweet spot of your genius zone is when you're doing what you most love to do. My experience, it doesn't matter if your genius zone is writing a book or making a symphony or making a soup or the way you are reading a story to your kids, or it's when you're doing what you most love to do. But it also needs to have a quality, in my experience, the happiest people are doing what they most love to do and making a contribution to other people at the same time. In other words, their genius zone benefits other people. And that's, I think, when human beings are at our absolute happiest, is when we're doing what we came here to do, what we love to do, what we are destined to do. And I hope everyone finds that in their life. Not everyone will, but I want you to put a real clear commitment on finding your genius zone and learning to fluff it up and bring it out in such a way that it serves other people.
So, Gay, do people know what they love? And I certainly didn't find it until much later on in their lives. And do we actually have the capability? Do we get the training? Do we learn how to look into our hearts and find out what we love? How do you help people do that?
Well, that's a really great question. And it's not as easy as it looks. I mean, at this stage of the game, I get to work with really gifted people who come for coaching. And, some of them are doing things like winning Nobel Prizes or starring in a movie and things like that. These are people that are absolutely top of their profession. And there's always a big fear that they carry around. There's only a few fears that human beings deal with as we're getting more and more successful, but they are such that even if you're at the top of the world, you're still going to be needing to deal with things in your inner world. So the genius zone is a process of kind of finding your way down deeper and deeper into what makes you feel most satisfied in life. So, for example, questions that I ask my clients. By the way, here's a $25,000 question. The reason I call it that is we have a program where CEOs and other organizations come here for a day of consulting all by themselves. There's no other people here, and we work with them from whenever they want to get up to whenever they want to leave. And it costs $25,000, and it all hinges on the first question we ask them. We put them in a little room and we ask them to sit for 10 minutes just doing nothing but going, what do I most love to do? what do I most love to do? And we ask them to just keep asking that question and breathing at the same time. Because here's the thing, when you hum, hmm, it's a genuine wonder sound, but it also integrates the two sides of your brain across your corpus callosum. Humming does that. So, hmm, start every wonder question out with a sincere because that puts the two sides of your brain together. So the question they go in that room and ask is, what do I most love to do that makes the biggest contribution to other people? And we just ask them to do that for 10 minutes. You would not believe what happens sometimes. People come out, and even though it may be 10 past 8 in the morning, they say, I got it. I got my money's worth already, because they've never asked themselves that question before. And so I want you to do that at your earliest opportunity. Go in a room by yourself and just nothing else around, and just sit there and breathe with that question. Even if you're already operating at the top of your game, you'll unearth things that I think will be very valuable to you.
I love that. Gay, you presume that people want to make a contribution to the world. Is that something that you screen people out, that you only work with people who want to make a contribution? Or do you find that everybody innately has that in them?
That's what I believe, Lorraine. I believe that everybody has that innate, but it gets covered over by the various traumas of life. You know, that you don't have any control over things that happen. Like a big formative event in my life was my father died when my mother was pregnant with me. And so my mother, God bless her, was very grief stricken, obviously, by losing her 32-year-old husband overnight in her marriage, and also being pregnant with me. And so my mother's adaptation to that, unfortunately, was she stopped eating and basically lived on coffee and cigarettes. And, you know, later on in her life, she felt kind of bad about that. But on the other hand, it was what kept her together. But during the process, my mother went from 120 pounds before I was born, and she lost weight. So when I was born, she weighed 89 pounds. And the reason I bring that up is it had a big effect on me, because it caused some of my thyroid machinery and stuff to shut down. When I came out, all of the machinery had been reset. So I was basically insatiable. And I became one of those really fat babies. And then I became a fat elementary school student, and on up until I had a magical enlightening event when I was 24 years old that allowed me to lose 100 pounds over the next year.
Wow. Well, you know, we have a question about that. So our producer can just bring up that question, because it's Nadia from Washington, and she read your book, by the way, but she does say that you lost 100 pounds, and she wants to know how you did that. And I can tell you, Gay, there are a lot of our audience who want to know that, and I'm one of them. So tell us more about that.
Good. Well, what happened was I was taken around to different weight loss specialists when I was a kid. And like in the 9th grade, they put me on these diet pills. And, you know, for a year, I slept about 4 hours a night. My grades went up from C to A, because I just couldn't do anything but study. But then when they unplugged me from the medication, I kind of had a big crash. So I was on and off different medications and things like that, but nothing ever worked until this one magic day when I was 24 years old. I think I was heading for a crash because I smoked heavily, and I was in this really yucky relationship that I couldn't figure out how to get out of. And I was teaching at a little boarding school for delinquent boys where I was literally making $100 a week. And so I really couldn't afford to get another apartment or anything like that. So anyway, my life was just, and I went out for a walk one afternoon, and I weighed 320 pounds. And I went out for a walk after I had a big argument with the woman that I lived with. And so I wasn't paying attention. I was angry, and such things happen. I wasn't paying attention, and I stepped on a place where there was snow covering a patch of ice, and my feet shot out from under me, and I went down, boom, on my back and I hit my head. I didn't knock myself out, but it kind of knocked me out of my usual way of being in myself. And it just kind of, shocked me. And I had this 2-minute enlightenment experience, which changed my entire life. And it's what I used to lose the weight. What happened was during this 2 minutes, I was laying on the ground, and for the first time, I could feel down through all these different layers of myself. Like I could feel that underneath all of this 100 pounds of extra fat were all of these emotions, feelings that I hadn't ever let myself feel or express. Oh, grief about my father dying, and anger about various things in my life, and sadness and fear. And it was like a light went on and I could see my emotions for the first time. That was a huge shocker right there, because I could see how many of these old emotions I'd never talked to anybody about, or, it was all like it was trapped inside that 300 pounds. And so, but that wasn't the real magic. The real magic was I could feel and see that down at the bottom of everything, we are all just pure consciousness. That's the way we come into the world. We're just pure consciousness. Then later on, life adds things to us, and various good things happen, bad things happen, and we form a personality based on kind of dodging our way through to the best version of ourselves we can be. So I could see all that in this magical 2 minutes. And then I began to come back out of it. Like I began to, oh yeah, I want a cigarette again. And oh yeah, I'm laying on my back shivering. And oh yeah, I got to go back home now. And so I could feel the kind of weight coming back on me again. But here's something I want you to remember, because I did something that changed my life. I made a vow, a commitment. I said, I promise you this. I'm going to find out how to live in that state of pure consciousness all the time. I'm going to find out how to feel that 24 hours a day. And then I kind of came back to my regular old world again. But that thought, that idea of making a commitment to this future version of myself, that's big, because at the time, I didn't know anything about manifestation or yoga or meditation or anything like that. I'd been an English major and I wanted to write the great American novel. So I hadn't gotten into my psychological studies or anything like that. So this was all coming out of nowhere, so to speak, in me. So I began changing my eating habits, though, using that state of consciousness, that pure state of consciousness. I began asking, when I would look at food to eat, I would begin asking, is this going to feed my pure consciousness? Or is this going to feed my old 300-pound body? And I began just eating things I'd never eaten before. A lot of things like fruits and vegetables that I just never paid any attention to. For me, a meal was a cheeseburger, French fries, and a chocolate shake, that kind of thing. And so I started eating this whole new pattern based on this inner feeling of pure consciousness. Will it feed that? So that's a question I want you to tuck away next time if you're wanting to change your weight or eating habits. Just ask yourself every time you take a bite of food, is this one feeding my old version of myself, or is this going to feed this new person I'm becoming? So I started eating that way. And in the first month, I lost about 35 pounds. Whoa. It probably didn't look like much for a 325-pound person to get down to only 290, but it was a big deal for me. And then I encountered my first of what I call the upper limit problem. Many of you are probably familiar with my book, The Big Leap, which was the predecessor to the Genius Zone. The Genius Zone is like the cherry on top of the sundae. That's the big leap. So you want to eat the cherry too, because it kind of gives you how to do all this in a much more compressed period of time. But what happened was I'd lost the 35 pounds and I went down to Cambridge, Massachusetts to celebrate. I wanted to get some new books at the bookstore there and things like that. And so I went down and I was walking along the street in Cambridge, and I looked in a window and there was a family of 4 eating this gigantic ice cream sundae creation with bananas and everything. And I just went completely unconscious. I hadn't had anything like that for over a month. And I just went in and I said, give me one of those. And it was like, for about 20 minutes, I was high as a kite and all that sugar was pumping through me. But then about 20 minutes after that, boom, I got the worst stomach ache of my life. And I just felt like I was going to die. And it was all of that yuck from the sugar and everything pouring through my body on that pure body that I'd cultured for the last 30 days. Well, I didn't make that mistake many other times, I'll tell you, because it left a real impression on me. So gradually, by just doing my consciousness diet, I lost more than 100 pounds. You can't see sitting up, but I weigh about 100 pounds. I'm sorry, I weigh about 180 pounds. I've lost more than 100 pounds from where I was 50 years ago.
That's pretty amazing. We have another question about, you mentioned being a writer and having authored 6 books myself, one of which was a novel, the other 5 were business books. I know what it's like to write and write and write. And I have one of my novels that's never been published, and they can become pretty depressing. So if you'll just bring up that question, our producer, about the writer, Nate from Boise, Idaho, says, that's a related question. You make the distinction between ordinary creativity and true creativity. What is that?
Yes. Ordinary creativity is when you're using your creativity for somebody else's goals. You might have a job. One of my jobs once was writing advertising copy. That's a long way from my goal of writing the great American novel, but I was 26 and starving, so I wrote everything I could get my hands on. I think the important thing is true creativity serves your goals. It's about what your genuine creative offering that you're here to make. What is that? And unless we find that and bring that forth, we're going to be using our creativity in an ordinary way to serve other goals that are not necessarily our own. My mother was a great example of that. She became, after she kind of got her life back together, she became she was also a gifted newspaper columnist and had a column every day on the front page of the Leesburg newspaper in Leesburg, Florida, for, 30 or 35 years. But my mother, when she was toward the end of her life, really felt anguish that she had used her creativity to work for a newspaper and everything, but she never sat down and wrote this book that she wanted to write. And so I watched that, and I wanted to make, I didn't want to fall into that trap. And so early on, I began focusing on who am I really? What is my real creative focus? What am I really here to do? Finally, I struck gold when I was 34 years old. I finally figured out the purpose of my life, and I sat down and I wrote it out, and it's basically the same one that's in The Big Leap, which is I expand every day in love, creativity, and abundance as I inspire other people to do the same. I think that once you tune in and find your own true creativity and make a commitment to expressing it, it puts you on a wavelength or a moonbeam or something that it has its own satisfaction to it. So even if you only do 10 or 15 minutes a day of your real genius, it has a real nurturing quality to it.
Yeah, I believe that one of the things we do at EWA is we have what we call affirmations, and which basically states the future in the present, which lets your subconscious become used to the idea of success in that area. And that's exactly what you just said. I want to go back to the writer idea because there is a question and I want to make sure that we answer our listeners and viewers. Steve from Davenport, thanks for saying this, Steve, because I can identify. You wanted to be a writer, Gay, but then you discovered you were not a good novelist. How did you get your confidence back?
Oh, great question. Well, I cringe when I think of the novel I tried to write when I was there 22 years old, because, what does a 22-year-old know about life much, And so fortunately, those are somewhere out there that my first couple of novel attempts. I think I was trying to do something that I wasn't organically here to do. Like, for example, where my life changed as a writer was when I was starting my master's degree at the University of New Hampshire in counseling. this was after I started losing the weight. I discovered that 20 minutes away was this world-class counseling program at the University of New Hampshire, and I started taking classes there. And um, what I found was that in finding myself as a writer, I actually found it while in the process of counseling other people in my program there. And I had a particularly gifted professor named Dwight Webb. And I owe Dwight so much. God bless you. And I said, what I'd really like to do is find some way of writing about the counseling process. And because that's so fascinating to me. And he said, well, why don't you? Oh, I told him I like to write poetry too. And he came up with this genius idea. He said, hey, for your master's thesis, why don't you write a whole bunch of poetry looking at different things that go on during the counseling and therapy process? And that was like a gift from heaven. And I started doing that, and I turned in my thesis, I think had 35 or 40 poems that looked at different aspects of, being with people and the changes that people went through. And that changed my life, because 3 of those poems got published in a counseling journal, and they were seen by 2 professors at Stanford who invited me to come out there for my PhD. And so
I love it. That's so
much. It's total synchronicity. And I think everybody can do that if they're locked in on their wavelength about if you've got a sincere inquiry in yourself to, what am I here for? What am I exceptionally gifted to do? What of all my contributions would benefit other people the most? Those kinds of questions put you on a wavelength that I don't think you can make any mistakes once you start asking those questions, because life will take you around in different ways and present you with the possibilities.
Love that. But I do want to ask you one question that's been burning in my mind, and that is the differences between generations. When you look at the boomers, certainly the great generation, the boomers, Generation X and Z and Y, and all of the various millennial characteristics, do you think that some generations have more self-knowledge than others? And the second part of the question is, do you think we're raising our children to be narcissists with too much internal looking? What do you think?
It's possible. It's an interesting theory. I happen to live in an extremely rarefied atmosphere where a lot of my friends who have kids, they're some of the most amazing human beings. They're like from another planet, and so I'm a little bit skewed in the direction of feeling hopeful for the future. But I think realistically, yeah, there's probably a lot of narcissism around, and also it seems to me that there's people are not calling on their children to show up responsibly as much. And I know for me, when I was growing up, and the idea of being late for something was so inconceivable. My family was so into doing what you said you were going to do. And if you said you were going to show up at noon, by golly, if you showed up at 1 o'clock, you owed an apology. I mean, at 12, you owed an apology for that. So I think there's a laxity of responsibility all over the place. And you can see that in the political world too. When's the last time you saw a politician accused of something and he said, or she said, you're absolutely right. I did that. Boy, thanks for pointing that out. It's all defensiveness and attacks and everything like that. So it models a lack of maturity that I think kids learn from.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and we always hope to do the best for our children and grandchildren. So we only have about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I do want to get some sort of action items for our audience. Besides the humming, and asking yourself what you most love to do, what are some of the other techniques that our audience could use to get into their genius zones?
Perhaps the most important one is the power of commitment. Commitment is a key, because there's such a difference between sitting on the bench and being out in the field. Once you're out on the field, you live by the power of your commitments. So, specific suggestion, make a commitment this moment. I commit to bringing forth more and more of my genius every day of my life. I commit to bringing forth more and more of my genius every day of my life. Use that as an anchor point in your life.
There's a question that just came up. I want to make sure we answer it because it's about Oprah Winfrey. And if our producer will just put that up. Sunny from Atlanta, Georgia, said that Oprah Winfrey is her inspiration. And apparently, you know Oprah Winfrey. Can you tell us a little bit about your interaction with her?
Well, we first became acquainted with Oprah in 1990. So what's that, 32 years ago? And right then she was in the height of her fame. And we wrote a book, Katie and I wrote a book called Conscious Loving. And it was our first big relationship book. And I got lucky, I guess we both got lucky because our publicist called the Oprah show and they said yes on her first call. So it took her about 30 seconds to book us on Oprah. So, and that's how I met her the first time, was she'll come into this, come into the backstage area and chat you up a little bit before the show. And it's a kind of people often ask me what it's like to be on Oprah. And we were on there several times back during the 90s. And I always say, well, you can get a sense of it. Go down to your local coffee shop and order 10 shots of espresso and drink them very quickly. And then over the next hour or so, you'll feel what it feels like to be on Oprah, because not only do you have 10 million people looking at you, but you got, 150 people in the studio audience who are all ready to cheer or thumbs down, and it's very electric situation.
What amazing experience. Gay, we definitely would like to have you on again if you would be so kind. And we're so grateful to you for spending the time you spent with our network and the time you spent on the show as well. So our grateful thanks. And everybody, if you haven't read Gay's books, they are spectacular and will change your life. So please will you make sure to go get them if you don't already have them. And I do want to leave you with a question today. Are you operating in your genius zone? And if you're not, please do what Gay recommended you do. Gay, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Lorraine. Pleased to be with you.
Thank you again. So, of course, it's not just at the end. It's coming up with another show, and we try to do that every time we close off our show. We bring you a new one. And here's a new one coming in just a week from now. We are going to feature one of our exceptional women awardees. Her name is the Honorable Ellen McCarthy. She is the former Assistant Secretary of Intelligence, who after decades of protecting our country, working in government roles, has now moved into the private sector and has started a fascinating company and a fascinating nonprofit called Truth in Media and Just the Facts. We are going to hear from Ellen all about her time in the government service and, of course, what she is doing in those new companies. So important for us to get rid of fake media and know that we can actually trust what we read and see and hear. What an amazing contribution to our society. We look forward to having Ellen with us. I hope you will join us for that show. And of course, go on to Apple and please leave us a fabulous review. And we are also on Spotify. Register at our YouTube channel. We'd love to see you there. All our shows are up there. And I look forward to seeing you in a very short time. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you.